Live from beyond the Beltway, this is Bruce DuMont with our weekly analysis of national politics featuring occasional injections of rumor and innuendo, all offered up by our panel of political insiders, pundits, power brokers, public servants, professors, and most importantly, plain-speaking Americans from coast to coast. Tonight featuring commentary by Democratic businessman Patrick Hanley, economist Mike Miller, pro-Trump Republican attorney Judith Sherwin, and talk show host Stephanie Trussell. I'm Bruce DuMont. Good evening. Welcome to our program. We're coming to you live from just outside Chicago, the AM 560 studios of Salem Media in Chicago, WYND. Nice to have you with us. Phone lines open for the full 2 hours, 1-800-723-8289. That's 1-800-723-8289. As always, thanks to Donald Trump, the U.S. Justice Department, Joe Biden, and Hunter Biden, we always have lots to talk about every Sunday night this week, and tonight is no exception. And I'm going to begin with my Democrat, Patrick Hanley. He is in studio with me this evening. And Patrick, I want to begin with you. How excited are you with these indictments? I know you're going to say it's horrible for the country. I know that. But here's another indictment against the President of the United States, more charges against him. And at first blush, it looks like it would be a bad political thing for anybody to go through. But as a Democrat looking at the challenges ahead in 2024 with your current incumbent president, how excited are you about these subjects? Is this political? Is this a big political gift to you guys?
I would say what it is validating. I think a lot of us watched what happened on January 6th, and we read about what had been happening from the election till January, where the president was doing everything he possibly could to overturn the results of elections, from intimidating state officials to directing the Department of Justice to follow goose chases around the election, to incitements around fraud and kind of calling out all these things. And I think what this shows is that in the clear light of day, with a very sober prosecutor, that we can clearly demonstrate how the president lied, how he knew that he had lost the election. He lied about it to the folks around him. And then he went on to try and overturn the results of a legitimate election.
A lot of people in this country who are Democrats, independents, and even Republicans, they will agree with everything that you've said, but they will say, you know what? I'm tired of hearing this story.
Yeah.
This is an old story.
Yeah.
Now again, it's being brought to a judicial crescendo here, but there's no new news here that we're hearing.
No, there is no new. No, you're exactly right. And a lot of the folks that have come out that worked on the impeachment are all pretty uniformly saying, "We told you so," because we presented this 450-page document that has a lot of what we're hearing today. But the difference is that Republicans in Congress aren't going to stop there from being consequences. Go ahead.
In studio with me is Stephanie Trussell. She is a Republican. She is a talk show host. And since we're dealing right now with the political aspects of this, I want to get your reaction on the political stuff here. How much is this new? How much is this likely to change, the thinking of Republicans in this country? And we should mention you're for Vivek. You like Vivek.
I like him a lot. Yes.
Go ahead.
I do. Well, if everything that Trump has done is so egregious, why has it taken over 3 years to actually charge him with this? Mm-hmm. And all these indictments line up with every time they find something on Hunter, every time something on the Democrat side happens, then suddenly here's an indictment of Trump. This is just a distraction from our economy, from what's going on with China, what's going on in Iraq, and the Straits of Hormuz and everything else that's going on. Let's talk about Trump. It is old news, same soup, just reheated. Give us something exciting. And it's just so funny. I can't wait until they prove what was in his heart, that he knew it was a lie. He honestly believed that he won the election and that something happened inappropriate. And he's never, ever wavered from that.
Is that why he told the vice president, "You're too honest"?
I want to move over to the legal aspect. Judith Sherwin joins us, longtime guest on this program. She joins us from Pennsylvania tonight. Judith, of all the legal things that have happened to the president, former president, or what might happen to him in the future, where would you put these indictments and these charges against the others? How would you measure them insofar as legal importance are concerned?
Well, first of all, I would think that in spite of what Patrick said, that there is great disappointment on the side of our Democrat brethren in this country and sisterin, because they were hoping for a conspiracy to commit an insurrection, and they didn't get one. What they got was an indictment because of things he said, which of course deals with political speech. They claimed that he, as Patrick put it, ran around and sent the Justice Department around to investigate various things. I wish to point out to you, and if you would take a look at Article 2 of the Constitution, the President of the United States is the chief legal officer of the United States. And when he is presented, as this president was, with numerous instances of things that did not look exactly kosher, in the 2020 election, it was not up to him to ignore it. It was not up to Bill Barr, who's probably been scared out of his mind by Jack Smith, to ignore it. It was not up to Mike Pence to ignore it, which he did. It is not up to anybody, really, once he says, there's something funny going on here.
Okay,
but there's so
and we
clearly.
need to investigate.
One second, Judith. Let's go. Let's go to
Well,
Patrick.
and I
No,
like
Let's go to Patrick. Let's go to Patrick. Then we'll back to you, Patrick.
There so clearly wasn't anything fishy happening, and that's what was the result of the dozens of federal and state cases that have happened over the last 2 years, trying to find instances of fraud, right? And so the election was lost by the president. And then what this indictment so clearly shows is that it wasn't his speech, right? Or paragraph 3 of the indictment says the president can lie about the results of an election. That's protected. That's protected by Amendment 1. The president can't knowingly then try and overturn the results of the election by directing his own administration and by intimidating other state officials to that effect. The whole fake elector scheme turns out it turns out was quite an established conspiracy by the co-conspiracists that were really
back to Judith, and then we were going to hear from Stephanie.
That.
Go ahead,
yeah,
Judith.
First of all, this business about phony electors. Okay, the business about phony electors actually started in 2016. Well, it's probably been done a number of times before, but Hillary Clinton tried to do exactly the same thing. Jamie Raskin stood up on the House of the floor and tried to urge the electors not to vote for Donald Trump, even though they were duty-bound in their various states to do so. This is absolutely ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous. And I would like to point out to you that there were a number of things that were fishy. Never in the history of my life, and certainly before, did 6 states, most of them swing states, stop counting in the middle of the night when Trump was leading and resume counting the next morning when all of a sudden Biden had gazillions of votes and Trump had 0. No, I am sorry. You can shake your head. You can say there's no evidence. You can say there's no evidence about this or about Biden's corruption. You're wrong.
Judith, when we come back, we're going to pick this conversation up. And I want to ask the question out there for those, there may be some undecided voters that listen and watch this program and have followed all this stuff. How many people are really still undecided? I mean, could we have the election tomorrow and would we know who the president is? Back shortly.
Oh, hello. You know, these days, I'm often quoted as saying, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. People forget that I was the first technology president, using the telegraph, T-mails as I like to call them, to communicate with my generals. Well, today, we are fighting a cybersecurity war, and our best defense is for folks to follow some of these tips when they're online. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Hover your cursor over links to determine the true web address. Look for misspellings and poor grammar, which are warning signs of fraud. Be suspicious of emails requesting urgent action, and never give away sensitive personal information. With malware for none, with cyber protection for all. This is your humble servant, Abraham Lincoln.
The central and midwestern U.S. averages more than 850 tornadoes each year, and lately, the number of floods has been rising in the region too. So chances are, there will be more twisters and floods near here again. And between school, sports, and social lives, chances are, you won't be with your kids when it happens. Will they know what to do? Ready.gov/kids has all the educational tools and information to make the conversation easy. When the time comes, chances are they'll feel prepared, not scared. So talk with your family today.
Bruce DuMont back on Beyond the Beltway. And again, in case you just tuned in, we're talking about the legal issues involving Donald Trump, and we'll talk about the Biden issues as the program unfolds this evening. But again, the special prosecutor, special counsel Jack Smith last week came up with additional charges against Donald Trump, and those charges were conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of a official proceeding, and a conspiracy against the rights of some Americans. And as you look at those, I'm going to ask you, Stephanie, to begin this. Of those charges, do any of them pop out, or are they all part of this sort of mush that the American people are trying to digest?
Well, they've been talking about insurrection. That's all we've ever heard, but not one person has been charged with insurrection. And if it's a conspiracy, where are the co-conspirators? Why haven't they indicted anyone else? Where's everybody else? And they haven't figured out every time.
What about the 1,100 people that have already been charged, though?
You mean the people
not with conspiracy?
Not with conspiracy. And so what gets me is that every time they indict him, his numbers go up. They haven't figured that out yet, because people understand if they can go after the president, they can go after him. He shouldn't even be charged. This is all a distraction. They can't beat him head on. So let's make him ineligible to run. And trying to rush the case, trying to get him to court quicker. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is just fight fairly, but we know the Democrats don't do that.
Patrick, do you believe that the principal goal here, as Republicans have articulated, is they want to find a way? They thought the impeachment was going to do it. Now they got the indictments. They just want to absolutely make sure this guy never goes to the post again, because they fear he is going to be elected.
And is that you mean Democrats want that?
Yeah, Democrats.
We want that politically, but I got to say, this isn't about politics. It's not about it for me, and it's not about it for a lot of my friends in the Democratic Party. This is about seeing justice done. This is about seeing what happens when a president tries to overturn a legitimate election that he knew that he lost. And that's what the indictment does such a good job of showing us. And if you read the indictment, it's 45 pages long. It's pretty short. It's pretty clear. It's very well written. And it is a vice grip on what Trump thought, what he said, his behaviors, and his actions. And his actions are what are being charged now.
Okay, we're going to go to Judith in just a moment, but I want to ask this follow-up question. To you, you're a young man, young Democrat,
sure,
family on the way.
Yeah.
Do you want to see Donald Trump in prison?
Yeah, I do. I do want to see Donald Trump in prison. Donald Trump is a criminal. He's a criminal from his business dealings before he became president, and he was a criminal as president. He was also a criminal after being president. This guy deserves prison time.
All right, you paused before you gave me the answer, which I appreciate. So I'm going to ask one follow-up. What do you think the impact of Donald Trump in prison, having either lost an election or won an election, what do you think that impact has on people around the world looking at the United States?
The fact that Donald Trump is a serious political figure in this country gives every other country pause when they think about U.S. leadership. It is very, very worrisome that Donald Trump is able to somehow convince so many Americans that he deserves any position of serious power.
Judith Sherwin, my question, do you want to follow up on those answers of Patrick? What do you think the impact would be? Let me ask the question, first of all. What do you think the impact would be around the world if Donald Trump is convicted of these charges?
Well, I think it puts us in the banana republics category.
In what way?
The only other countries in the world. I mean, if this were going on in a South American country or a Middle Eastern country, as a matter of fact, our completely self-aware Secretary of State Anthony Blinken put out a tweet because Putin put his biggest political rival in jail yesterday. I mean, we are doing the same thing. Okay, so look, Patrick, I assure you, felt this way about Donald Trump from the moment he came down the escalator in 2015. He hadn't done anything, okay? He was a successful businessman. He was a successful TV star. He had built a life and a business. And yeah, there were people who didn't like dealing with him. There were people who thought he wasn't fair to them. I could put together a line of business people who will say that about any other business guy who they did business with, who they thought got the better of them. And Bruce, I'd like to finish this one thing. It is one thing to sit here on your show and make the statements that Patrick is making. It is, and make the statements that the New York Times makes or that CNN makes. It's quite another thing, and I think Mr. Smith is going to find that out. There is a thing in the world for criminal cases called the burden of proof. Okay? Donald Trump doesn't have to prove anything. Jack Smith has to prove every single word of his ridiculous indictment.
All right, now,
and he
here's
will not be able
here's
to
my
do
question.
it.
I'll go on the issue of burden of proof and what he has to prove. You're right. Donald Trump doesn't have to prove anything right now. But there's over 300 million.
Ever.
Just a minute. There's over 300 million Americans, many of whom were watching television on January 6th. They may not know the intricacies of every law and twist and what was going on. They saw with their own eyes something that they perceived to be as either wrong, un-American, or an attack on democracy. Now you take that population, they're now the jury in the court of public opinion, which then goes to vote. And I'm questioning you, Stephanie Trussell, first of all, to tackle this. What impact does it have on them? Is this just, hey, I knew this all the time, and I'm absolutely anti-Trump? Or are some of them opening their minds, believing that the legal prosecution of what they saw with their own eyes is okay because they thought that Donald Trump did wrong on January 6th?
Okay, first of all, I love what Judith said about him being a successful businessman. He was on TV. He was on every show. Everybody loved him. Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, until he came down that escalator as a Republican. And suddenly he's a criminal, not only in what he's done recently, but he's a criminal.
Stephanie, answer my question, please.
Okay, watching January 6th, Trump did not instruct people to do what they did. And anyone who acted inappropriately should be charged appropriately.
But here's my question.
But,
here's my question. I want you to answer it, and then I want Judith to answer it. I may not be talking about reality here, but I think I am. I'm talking about the people who are primarily apolitical. They don't watch this show. They don't watch the Sunday shows. They're apolitical, but again, their vote counts just as much as anybody on this panel tonight, maybe even more. My question to them is, on January 6th, they rendered a verdict in their brain that day what was going on. Now, my question to you is, and I'm going to give you a second chance at it, do you think there's anybody who rendered a verdict on that day, be they the Republican, Democrat, or Independent, do you think any of them are going to change their mind with all of the legal aspects and all the legal mumbo-jumbo we're going to hear between now and next November?
Well, January 6th, as I said, a few hours, that was horrible. But we're supposed to forget the summer of peace in 2020, Democrat cities being overturned by radical people, mostly peaceful protesters, and how Kamala could be part of a group that helped fund to get these people out of jail. So, January 6th, bad, but also the summer of unrest. We still have cities that have yet to be refurbished and replaced and back to restored.
Stephanie.
That's the word. So no, people that are apolitical, there's certain people that will never change their mind, but people are waking up and they realize if they could do that to a president, an ex-president, they could do that to. It's just what Trump is saying. I want
to go to Judith in just a moment, but I want to ask a question. Mm-hmm. When all the summer of love and hate was going on, in mostly in the Pacific Northwest, who was president of the United States?
Joe Biden?
No.
Oh, you mean the 2020?
No, with all that was going on in Seattle and Portland, the summer of hatred, who was the president of the United States?
Okay, right, Trump. Okay, yeah, I'm
Who
sorry.
was the attorney general?
Right, okay, I understand that. But
What? I'm asking.
Okay,
This
okay.
is just a question.
All right.
I don't know the answer to this question. What did they do to crack down on the lawlessness, which, by the way, every American was also watching on television every night?
Okay.
The lawlessness that they saw going on in major U.S. cities in the Pacific Northwest. What did they do to stop it? Arrest people? What did they do?
The federal government, they have each state has their own, their own government. We can't come in. He offered. I remember him offering to Chicago, I will send National Guard to Lori Lightfoot, and what did she say? Tell Trump to go F himself. This is what he had to deal with. He was offering help,
but
at
there
the
were
end of
also
the day,
potential.
it's up
There
to
were also
them.
potential violations. If there was a conspiracy, which many people thought that there was a conspiracy that was going on or communication going on between Antifa. The Antifa people in Seattle were in touch with the Antifa people so it crossed state lines. So it became an a national issue. So let me turn over and ask Judith this follow-up, and then we're going to get back to our core discussion. But again, my question to you is, all that was going on when Donald Trump was president. Mm-hmm. Does he get credit for any of that? How does he judge his own actions and the actions of the Attorney General in all of these anti-government displays that were going on while he was president, during the transition, and during the election? Does he get it? What grade do you give him for doing that?
Yeah. Well, he should have made.
Do I get
Judith.
a chance to answer? Thank you. Sorry.
You know what, Judith? Judith, one second. We've got to wrap. We've got to wrap right now. My question was too long, and I want to give you the full opportunity to respond to it. 1-800-723-8289. We're not trying to look entirely in the rearview mirror tonight, but again, a lot of the ways in which American people are going to vote is going to be based on contemporary action, and a lot of it is going to be based on what they remember in their own minds, having watched it on TV. Back shortly.
STEM is precise, no margin for error.
Dare to forget that. Dare to have fun with it. Get weird with it. Dare to send those old STEM theories flying past the neighbor's house into outer space. Dare to program something internet-breaking, record-breaking. Dare to blow their minds. Dare to learn the difference between sedimentary and metamorphic rock. Go find those rocks. Dare to keep daring. Dare to STEM. Check out She Can STEM to get started.
STEM is precise, no margin for error.
Dare to forget that. Dare to have fun with it. Get weird with it. Dare to send those old STEM theories flying past the neighbor's house into outer space. Dare to program something internet-breaking, record-breaking. Dare to blow their minds. Dare to learn the difference between sedimentary and metamorphic rock. Go find those rocks. Dare to keep daring. Dare to STEM. Check out She Can STEM to get started.
Judith. Judith, sure, when we turned to you, I asked a really good question before the break, and you were chomping at the bit, but I didn't want to interrupt you. I guess I really did interrupt you, but now we're going to give you the floor. What's the answer?
Okay. What's the answer? So, number one, the President of the United States is not the king. So the President is not allowed to go into a state or go into a city unless the city or the state says, sure, let's bring in the National Guard. Otherwise, he can't do it. Now, as Stephanie clearly said, Lori Lightfoot told him what he could do with himself when he said, I want to send troops to Chicago. The governor of Minnesota told him the same thing. And eventually, he actually did get into Minnesota, and he was able to do a number of things with the National Guard to actually save the city from being completely destroyed.
Judith,
you asked me
quick follow-up question, and it is this. Are you saying, because I don't know the answer to this one, are you saying that there was no federal law enforcement Justice Department
No,
thing
that's
that
not.
could have been.
That's not what I'm saying. Okay, you are hearkening back to a very old law that talks about crossing state lines to start a riot. And yes, they could have done that. They didn't have enough evidence to do that. Number one. Number two, he in many cities, any place where they attacked a federal courthouse, specifically in the Northwest, they sent in FBI. They sent in people to fight with Antifa and the other people, but they could not just go into the city of Seattle and take over the job of the police. That's not, you don't want the president of the United States to do that any more than you want the president of the United States to impose a COVID mandate vaccination requirement on you. It's not his job. His job is to preserve the republic, which he was trying to do, okay? And his job in the summer of 2020 was to get his attorney general to find a federal solution to the problem, which of course he didn't because he was such a coward and he was afraid he was going to be impeached. But that's a whole other story. You need to understand that there are lines here that the president can't cross because he's not the king, okay? It's really very simple. So to blame him for 2020, you know,
let me put my. We're going to put an end to this part of the discussion. Then we're going to move back to the core stuff and looking ahead, not in the rearview mirror. Okay. I only bring up the subject because every time, every Republican or independent, maybe even some Democrats, who I've run into over the last couple of years, when we talk about January 6th, they always bring up the rioting and the disturbances of what was happening in the Pacific Northwest in the 2 years prior to that, which was on Donald Trump's watch. Okay. They always talk about it. In other words, why just listen to my. This is a political question, okay? My question is no. You didn't answer this question because I want to put it in I want to clarify it.
Okay.
That's part of the Republican answer to January 6th. It's whataboutism. Let me finish. There's never a really good answer to that. You articulated a very good answer just now, saying that the federal government could not do that. The Trump White House was not saying anything about that. So from a Republican perspective, thinking about the disturbances in Seattle and Portland, that's a good answer. That's a good comeback to what happened on January 6th. The January 6th was a response to that, at least a partial response to it. That's an answer I don't think it's some would argue, Judith, again this, and then we're going to get off it. Some would argue that the rioting in Seattle and Portland and all the disturbances that were going on, during the latter days of the Trump administration, it was good for Donald Trump because he could take a look at all those crazy people burning down American cities. You need law and order.
Well,
Bruce,
that didn't happen.
I think you're onto something. And actually, can I make perhaps an unexpected?
One second. We're going to go to Patrick and then back to Judith.
Let me make perhaps an unexpected point about how the two are actually tied together. I think you expect me to come back and say, well, these are completely different instances that happen for completely different reasons, which I think fundamentally is true, and that's why we're indicting the president for his role in one of them. But what ties them together, and let me remind you that 93% of 7,700 protests in the summer of 2020 were peaceful. These are these were peaceful protests. Guys, give me a moment. Give me a moment. Give me a moment.
According to who?
Okay. Are you watching Sesame Street version?
One second. Please, we can't all talk at the same time. But again, you just stated. But according to whom? Who are you quoting here?
Let me find it for you. Let me find it for you. Actually, yeah, I did. I lived there.
I went down there.
Folks, we can't all talk. All right, we can. Judith,
this is from a reputable source that tracks law enforcement infractions. It really, and I could pull it for you, and I'll send it along to you after. But we know that these these protests are largely peaceful. But the protests that weren't, the places that were violent, The extremism happened because of these echo chambers online, where people are only reading what they want to read, and misinformation is firing everywhere. People get obsessed and extreme over things they think is happening.
Right,
That part
right.
is true,
So
and that
let's have-
happened.
let's have
And that happened.
censorship.
Hold on.
Let's have
That
censorship,
happened in
okay?
Portland and Seattle. That happened on January 6th. People are spending too much time in their ecosystems, and they're spending too much time hearing what they want to hear, and that's driving them to violence and extremism.
Okay.
Is one more egregious than the other?
Okay, here, if I could make a point.
Go
please.
ahead.
Okay.
You've
The
made many
impetus
tonight, by the
for
way.
What happened on January 6th goes a lot farther back than the summer of 2020, okay? It goes back at least, if you want to think about this, to the hearings regarding Brett Kavanaugh. The
Before
people
that?
who opposed Brett Kavanaugh broke into the Senate office building,
Yes.
accosted senators in the elevators,
Yep.
stood up at committee meetings and had to be dragged out by their hair, carried on and took over, pounded on the doors of the Supreme Court, and basically behaved like a bunch of savages for an entire week.
Okay.
All right.
Judith,
Celebrities.
And
Judith,
that's
Celebrities.
what-
let me just say something.
What
Judith, let me say this as the host of the program. And again, I am responsible for this, so I take full discredit for this. We're spending right this moment. We're spending too much time looking in the rearview mirror. Everything you
I would agree.
have just said, Judith, I agree with. Most Republicans agree with. Everything we talked about Seattle and Portland, I think I agree with. We all Republicans or conservatives believe that to be the case. And that in some, but I'm saying, and what's going on here is that many Americans who saw all this on television and were, throwing things at their television set, very frustrated. A portion of them decided that they were going to protest what was happening on January 6th, and a few of them, maybe 1,100 of them, went too far, and they became violent, and now we have this new incident called, January 6th. Now, with all of that in the background, there isn't anybody listening or watching tonight that can change one second of what happened on January 6th. Put that in the back of your mind. It has nothing to do with what we can do in the future. However, we can say Donald Trump did the best he could to protect us. Some people will say Donald Trump just reaffirmed what I thought, that he was a thug and a bad guy. But right now, the issue here is, are we going to elect Donald Trump with all of his failings and good things as well for some? Are we going to send him back for another 4 years to lead the country, turn our back on a Democrat whose only claim to fame is that he beat Donald Trump?
After 50 years in D.C.
After 50 years, and again, overlook all of these questionable business deals that he either has or perceives to have? Are we going to overlook that? And do we want? Are we going to overlook, hold our nose, and go and vote for Donald Trump, and hope that he will become president of the United States with the understanding that if he got elected, he could be serving from a prison cell? Isn't that what we're dealing
I'd
with?
like to, if I
Go
could,
ahead, Judith.
Okay, so thank you. I'd like to. First of all, you asked a question a little while ago where you said, how are people feeling about these indictments and what is it doing, and do people blame him for January 6th? Well, every time there's a new indictment, his numbers go up. So it's
Among
not a
Republicans.
hypothetical question.
His
Among a lot
Republican
of people,
numbers go
among
up.
independents, excuse me, according to many, you can shake your head all you want, and you can read the New York Times all you want, and I think we'll talk
I don't read
about
the New York
that
Times.
later. Oh, good. That's one point in your favor, but no, he's gaining with independents. He's gaining with Republicans for sure, and he's gaining even with some Democrats, because people, and with Democrat-based groups who normally won't even look at a Republican, and it's for exactly the same reason that Stephanie is talking about. If a thug like Jack Smith, who's lost every important political case that he has brought, 9-0 overturned in the Supreme Court, which isn't a great thing to happen, and it's happened to him more than once. If that kind of a person can try to put you in jail, they can put any one of us in jail for what we're all saying right now, except you. Okay? Seriously. You take what we are talking about tonight, and you can make an indictment out of it. Good luck to
But you couldn't indict me, right? Because I'm a member of the journal. I'm a journalist.
Well, I don't
So
know.
you're all going to pray. I'm okay. I'm hiding
You're
behind the
safe.
First Amendment.
You got to get out of
I
jail free card.
got to go. I got to sell something. Bye.
Patrick's okay.
1 second.
Yeah, he's in.
STEM is precise, no margin for error.
Dare to forget that. Dare to have fun with it. Get weird with it. Dare to send those old STEM theories flying past the neighbor's house into outer space. Dare to program something internet-breaking, record-breaking. Dare to blow their minds. Dare to learn the difference between sedimentary and metamorphic rock. Go find those rocks. Dare to keep daring. Dare to STEM. Check out She Can STEM to get started.
Flintstones, meet the Flintstones, they're the modern Sonic family. From the town of Fairfield, meet George Jetson. His boy Elroy.
With instant acceleration, electric cars are more fun to drive and more affordable than ever. Electric cars are here. Plug in to the present.
True.
Help start it.
Well, whoop. We're about to go back on the air. And we're now back on the air. You may have heard a little bit of what we were saying, but fortunately we were not saying anything against Judith Sherwin, who is 1,000 miles away. She is in Pennsylvania tonight around the microphones with me in Elk Grove Village. We have Patrick Hanley and we have Stephanie Trussell. And we have a caller on the line who's calling us from Austin, Texas, KLBJ. Go ahead, Sol, you're on the air.
I've got 3 points. I'm going to fly through them and hopefully get a response at the end.
Okay.
Number one, using our former president's language, Donald Trump is a stone-cold loser. We remind you that in 2016, he did not win the popular vote. As president, lost the Senate majority. 2020, loses the general election. 2022, the vast majority of his hand-picked election-denying candidates lost their election. And I'm certain, so long as we don't put up a squirrel up there, he'll lose in 2024 again. Number two, convicting a country's leader is not a sign of a banana republic. It's a sign of a strong democracy that respects its laws. France, Italy, South Korea, all convicted and some jailed their former leaders. See Silvio Berlusconi, Jacques Chirac, Heng Yong-suk. It is not an issue when a country with strong laws convicts a president. Is it a sign that actually nobody's above the law? And number three, it is very common that in federal cases, you build a case by first going through the low-hanging fruit, in this case, all the rioters, and then over time, build the case, gathering testimony, flipping witnesses, flipping co-conspirators, and so on and so forth, and then go up the chain to get the top guy. See John Gotti, who didn't go after John Gotti right away. You go after the henchmen, the Sammy the Bogravanos first, and then you go after the top guy, and that takes time. So it's not at all uncommon that this would take a couple of years to actually build a case of it.
Saul, stay on the line. Don't go away. I want to let our Republicans respond to what you've said. We're going to start with Stephanie Trussell. Stephanie, your response.
Well, again, as I said before, if it's so egregious, it's taking so long, and I love how Trump gets compared to the most. Normally Hitler, Stalin, and now Gotti for what he did. It's what Trump is. We can debate because again, people that hated him from the time he came down the escalator. I wasn't a Trump fan until I became one. We cannot debate what the facts are. And gas was $1.99 a gallon back in the day. The economy was booming.
Stephanie, can you debate? The question is, can you debate Saul's basic points, which were when you look at Donald Trump, the political Machiavellian, he helped lose the Senate. he wasn't able to keep the House. And if you look at the races that he became involved in, his people primarily, not always, lost. So he's not exactly this big wheeler dealer when it comes to political power. Just to that particular point. Speak to that.
Well, Trump is unique in the fact that he not only had the Democrats to battle with, he had the never-Trumper Republicans to battle with. Yeah. And that's the issue that we have. I know a little bit of something about state politics, and even in this great state of Illinois, we have people that will never vote for him. So Trump should have cleaned house.
But he lost.
But he should have drained the swamp, like he said.
He
trusted people that he shouldn't have. His personnel choices were, we can look back and say, I'm sure he would make some different choices. But again, it's the leadership state level, and we seem to love getting punched in the face. And some Republicans would vote or not vote, stay at home, just not to vote for him, giving the Democrats the.
Is he? Listen, quick question to you, then I want to hear Judith.
Okay.
Is he, as Saul has identified, from a political standpoint, and as a political chieftain, if you will, is Donald Trump a loser as a political leader, whereas he may be very popular with his positions?
No, Donald Trump is anything but a loser. He did something that no one else had ever done.
Why did he make bad choices for the U.S. Senate candidates?
Well, I think that Trump thought, once I win, the never-Trumpers, the people that didn't like me, they'll suddenly like me. He had no idea that even after he won, they were still not his friends. They were still stabbing him in the back. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I want to go to Judith Sherwin. Judith, I want you to respond to the same political question that Saul in Austin, Texas posed.
Well, sure. I guess my first comment is Sal's been watching The Sopranos a bit too much. And he's got a little bit too much faith in the office of the Justice Department. I used to have the similar kind of faith, but having watched what goes on there now, I seem to have lost it. First of all, it is very clear that and Patrick said it before, there isn't anything new in this indictment. Absolutely nothing. This is all the same nonsense that they lost on in the impeachment. Okay, so
but
now,
Judith, I want you to focus on Saul's point. You've alluded to the back end of what
which is Saul's
talked
point.
about.
His point.
His other point leading into that was Donald Trump was not a very astute.
Is a loser.
He was not a very astute political leader. I mean, can you?
Well, here's
dispassionately look at that and say, you know what, Saul's right on this particular point, but he's wrong on the other one.
Okay, he's wrong on the other one. I will agree with Saul on this point. He misjudged greatly the vicious nature of the people in his own party and the people who he was urged to bring into his administration, many of whom couldn't wait to run to the cameras and say, I'm not like Donald Trump. He's a crazy person. I'm a good person. He's a racist. I'm not a racist. He doesn't know. He's a moron, his first secretary.
What about the primary voters in Pennsylvania and Georgia? What about them?
What about them?
Can I just jump in? And I think Saul, that was a very astute 3 points. I think you're exactly right.
Bruce,
and on the second one, I just want to say how important it is that we view this country as bigger than Trump. And I think you made some really good points about countries with rules, putting leaders who break rules in jail, and I think that's exactly right.
Judith, last words to you. Go ahead. We've got a minute to go.
Okay. First of all,
30 seconds.
Number one. Yeah, 30 seconds. That's nice. It's good. So I don't even remember what the point was.
You know, the point is this. All right, the point is we're going to pick up on that again during the break. Maybe you can figure out the point you wanted to make.
Thank you.
And I'll think about the question that I just asked, so we can all come together. Remember that. This group will continue for another full hour. In the next hour, we're going to be joined by Mike Miller from the great state of Washington. He will join us with Miller's Moments, talking about the economy, and he'll weigh in on these issues that we've discussed as well. I'm Bruce DuMont, from coast to coast and border to border around the world. This is Beyond the Beltway.
Over. Chance high five. All right. When you adopt a shelter pet, you discover all the things that make them unique. And your mother and... I am totally a hot person. Right, guys? Thanks for being honest. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org.
Dallas, St. Louis, Nashville, Tuscaloosa. All major cities to feel the destruction caused by a direct hit from a tornado. Is Chicago next? It's not a question of if, but when, and the clock is ticking. Learn what to do now at ready.illinois.gov to become tornado ready.
Type 2 diabetes can have a big impact on your life, but how can it be prevented? Well, the first step is knowing if you have prediabetes, a serious medical condition that puts you at high risk for type 2 diabetes. 1 in 3 American adults has prediabetes, but more than 80% don't know they have it. The good news is, prediabetes can be reversed, and for many people, healthy changes in their daily routine can make a big difference. Take the 1-minute risk test today at doihaveprediabetes.org.